Plato said the goal of philosophy is freeing the soul from association with the body as much as possible. And he added, in this way we shall escape the contamination of the body's folly and filth. Everything must be separated from the body. Going beyond Plato, the Gnostics taught that the divine self fell into a material world, trapped in a body by the cunning and evil creator, the jealous Yahweh of the Bible. It's not moral transgression of God's command, but ignorance of our true origin that constitutes evil, and redemption is attained through an enlightenment that liberates our spirit from the prison of the body and the lower parts of the soul. Our goal is to escape all limitations. Our body limits us. Our spirit is infinite, whereas Platonism sees depravity in ontological terms as a falling away from the pure unity of being into the diversity of bodies. Christians believe depravity derives from an ethical rebellion against God. For Socrates and Plato, faults are due to ignorance, but in biblical religion, they are the result of transgressing God's command. Human sin, both guilt and corruption, is one of the most empirically verifiable truths. From the perspective of the biblical narrative, the desire to transcend human nature by our effort instead of to be glorified by God's grace is the dreary record since Adam of futile rebellion against God and the created design of every natural and moral law. We seek to justify and then ultimately deify ourselves by our works. It seems like there is a return to origins that we share in common. I just finished writing a book. It's the first volume in a 3-part series called The Divine Self, A History of Spiritual, Not Religious. And the first volume is titled The Shaman and the Sage. And I start with the so-called axial revolution in 6th century BCE, which encompasses really the whole territory of the Persian Empire, the whole territory from Western India to Eastern Europe, and from the Black Sea all the way down to Egypt. So an enormous expanse, the greatest civilization, greatest expanse at least of civilization to date. And out of that, more ritualistic religions turning into more philosophical religions. And Hinduism, of course, being at the forefront of that. The Greeks came by it late, but it was by shamans coming to town that we got philosophy. And there's a reason why the great philosophers of the West, particularly Pythagoras and Plato and others, have legends of going to India and to Egypt for higher wisdom. Whether or not they did, the fact that these legends arose shows the deference that Western philosophers had to Eastern philosophy. And so out of these philosophical religions came notions like reincarnation, shamanism, the idea that now everybody can be a shaman. Everyone, through philosophy, can go through the 3 worlds, through the pole in the middle of the universe. And in 2nd century Alexandria, you had a real mixture of influences there, particularly Platonism and Neoplatonism. It was the place where Neoplatonism was founded. Both Plotinus and Origen studied under Ammonius Saccas there in Alexandria. And out of that, you had various hybrids, syncretistic blends. Gnosticism originated there. Hermeticism was a combination of philosophy and magic, very shamanistic. But Gnosticism was very shamanistic too. It's all about escaping the body. The vision of souls, disembodied souls, and their recovery. Why do I say all this? Well, because this is very much a part of our culture. You might not think it. You might say, well, in our Eastern cultures, we have shamans. And in Western cultures, everything is rationalistic and so forth. Well, I try to show in this project that actually there's a lot more overlap. And that rationalists, if you cut them deeply enough, they bleed mysticism. And we'll see particularly, I think, in these quotes that I have before us, just how shamanistic today's scientists in the United States happen to be right now. Eric Davis argues the modern world owes more to Hermeticism's mystical mixture of Gnostic psychology and occult mechanics than one might suppose. And it's, it comes to us through a number of Western eruptions of this shamanistic experience, including the Renaissance. The charter of the Renaissance is called the Oration on the Dignity of Man by Pico della Mirandola. And in that oration, Pico says, speaking for God, I have placed you, Adam, in no particular place, so that you may of your own free will choose your own nature. No one had ever spoken like that. Choose your own nature. Maybe free to do what you want with your own nature, but not free to choose your own nature. This was a new idea. It's with us, of course. We know it's saturated, certainly Western culture. But this was a new idea. Adam, you are the free and proud shaper of your own being, Pico's Divine Father tells Adam. And the Hermetic imagination re-entered at the birth of the machine age as theosophy and technology went hand in hand. These were the boom years for pop mysticism, occult science, and decadent romanticism. I could go into telling some stories here about, for instance, Ascona, Switzerland, the Mountain of Truth, where some of the leading Gnostics, spiritualists, scientists, Nobel Prize-winning physicists, and artists, as well as theologians like Paul Tillich, Ernst Troeltsch, sociologists of religion like Max Weber, psychologists like Carl Jung, all met to have papers and seances. We don't have any seances planned for this event. You'll probably be happy to know. But that they were very much a part of, they practiced Gnosticism, not only talked about it. So technology is far more than a tool. It's part of an imagination. And the Gnostic imagination is very much infused in today's technology, at least in the West. This from Yuval Noah Harari in his book, Homo Deus, A Brief History of Tomorrow. He writes, in seeking bliss and immortality, humans are in fact trying to upgrade themselves into gods. The upgrading of humans into gods may follow any of three paths: biological engineering, cyborg engineering, and the engineering of non-organic beings. He adds, in the 21st century, the third big project of humankind will be to acquire for us divine powers of creation and destruction and upgrade Homo sapiens into Homo Deus. So we may well think of the new human agenda, he says, as consisting really of only one project with many branches attaining divinity. You shall be as gods. Interestingly, Harari invokes Pico's oration on the dignity of man when he says, the third big project of humankind will be to upgrade Homo sapiens into Homo Deus. So we may well think of the new human agenda as attaining divinity. Now, there's a paradox that I've found in transhumanism literature. On the one hand, it reflects an anthropocentric outlook, giving little attention to non-human creatures. They just kind of get left behind. Far from encouraging infidelity, Descartes believed he'd rescued God and souls from the relentless necessity of physical laws and mechanistic natural philosophy. As Paul Ricoeur observed, Descartes' influence remains influential. We construe the world in terms of the Cartesian dichotomy between the self as sovereign consciousness on the one hand and an objectivized, manipulable nature on the other. We conceive ourselves as authors of our own meaning and being, set in the midst of a world there for us to interrogate, manipulate, and control. In fact, Descartes said that apart from the soul, human beings are nothing but a machine. Transhumanists are convinced that their utopian vision will circumvent any potentially dystopian threats. Techno-evangelists are always optimistic. In fact, human vices will be cured through technological innovation. And they're very much millennialists. You have a secular millennialism in all of this. There's always a third age, the coming third age. One of the leading futurists and an inventor of artificial intelligence, the one really people at Google go to find out what's next, Ray Kurzweil, calls this eschaton the singularity. His 2005 title announced, "The singularity is near," and in 2024, without much imagination, the singularity is nearer. He says, our version 1.0 biological bodies are frail and subject to a myriad of failure modes, not to mention the cumbersome maintenance rituals they require. While human intelligence is sometimes capable of soaring in its creativity and expressiveness, much of human thought is derivative, petty, and circumscribed. The singularity will allow us to transcend these limitations of our biological bodies and brains. We will gain power over our fates at last. We will be able to live as long as we want, I guess, without bodies or brains. We will fully understand human thinking and will vastly extend and expand its reach. Our intelligence will be trillions of times more powerful than unaided human intelligence. In 1992, Benjamin Woolley proclaimed a new age. The horses are whinnying in their stables, the dogs are restive, and the soothsayers are proclaiming the revelation of new sooths. We are at the cusp of the most momentous changes ever witnessed, a new era of human civilization, a shift in paradigms as dramatic as a reconfiguration of the stars. The magician's language and lingo. Harari says, every day, millions of people decide to grant their smartphone a bit more control over their lives or try a new and more improved antidepressant drug. In pursuit of health, happiness, and power, humans will gradually change first one of their features, and then another, and another, until they will no longer be human. Many of these writers go back to Hans Moravec's pioneering 1988 work called Mind Children. Just all these terms in mind. Mind children, consciousness, robot, mere machine to transcendent mind, by Moravec, Oxford, 1999. Transhumanists envision an eschaton in which the human body is left behind. Indeed, our existence right now, our humanity as it is right now, will be left behind. It will be transcended. The real you consists of consciousness of your own inner thoughts. See, this is the divine self within us. This idea that the real I is a divine spark inside of me. If this is true, then the transition to a post-human self can occur through uploading consciousness to the cloud and enhancing it there, letting it choose whatever carapace it would like to live in any given moment, then switching that body, because it's just a container anyway, for another. David Chalmers has coined a term for this philosophy, this ideology behind transhumanism, as panprotopsychism. So panpsychism, as I'm sure you know, is that there is mind, universal cosmic mind running throughout everything, connecting. We're all connected. Our subconscious mind is connected to one universal mind, call it divinity or whatever. It's not a personal being. It's something running through everything. It's animism, and it's the philosophical religion that America's scientists are returning to. I wish I could give you the whole list of scientists on the cusp of AI and transhumanism technology. It's not a surprise that they're all in my state. They're not just New Agers. They're very serious about returning to shamanism. And they mention Gnosticism. They mention animism. Everything is alive, animated by universal mind. But no God, no soul. It's a spiritualistic materialism. Matter itself inherently is divine. Kurzweil says, proto-panpsychism strikes a middle ground between dualism and physicalism, materialism, which have long been the two major schools of thought. This view pictures something in the brain magically awakening to a fundamental force in the universe, some sort of cosmic consciousness. From this theosophical speculation, Kurzweil thinks that initially humans will make modified copies of themselves. He says one type of AI avatar that we can create, called a replicant, to borrow a term from Blade Runner. A lot of this is based on science fiction. It's amazing. Will have the appearance, behavior, memories, and skills of a person who has passed away, living on in a phenomenon I call afterlife. Very original. Reincarnation, we could say, will no longer be determined by one's merits or demerits, but will be entirely in the hands of the consumer. In the early 2040s, he says, nanobots will be able to go into a living person's brain and make a copy of all the data that forms the memories and personality of the original person. You too. Such an entity would be able to pass a person-specific Turing test and convince someone who knew the individual that it really is that person. According to all detectable evidence, they will be as real as the original person. So if you believe that identity is fundamentally about information like memories and personality, this would indeed be the same person. But the key presupposition here, of course, is if you believe that identity is fundamentally about information. Points up the Cartesian underpinning of all of this, that it's really mind over matter. We can already make an exact copy of small segments of the brain. Eventually, this will extend to the whole brain. So Kurzweil asks, is this you too conscious? Perhaps. Ethically, then, we ought to treat it as though it is conscious and therefore possessing moral rights. Yet this is not blind speculation. Panprotopsychism gives us good philosophical reason to believe that it's actually conscious. And so eventually, Mike two will be just as real and just as conscious as Mike 1, but then it will go on its separate way to be like my great grandchild, divine, the powers of divinity, to amazing powers of creation and destruction. Gnostics and cybernauts. The second century Platonist philosopher Celsus objected so strongly to Christian teaching, judging that it was, quote, bound to flesh and blood concerns. Especially, think about it, on every doctrine. They're so crude. They're so attached to the body. Why would we ever want to? We're nothing but rats. We're no better than rats. Why would God care about us enough to save us or damn us? Frankly, we have no value, and the goal, the only good benefit we have for redemption is that our soul gets to finally escape the body and go back and fly up to, the unity whence it came. Plato said the goal of philosophy is freeing the soul from association with the body as much as possible. And he added, in this way we shall escape the contamination of the body's folly and filth, and by our own efforts we shall know that all is pure. Everything must be separated from the body. The Timaeus relates that the primordial anthropology of androgynous bodies that were divided into male and female, and the goal of philosophy is to return to this androgynous condition. The inmost self is a bisexual spirit, not a sexed body. And once we descend the elevator into incarnation, this immortal essence is submerged into the slothful bags of fluid and bone we lug about planetside. Going beyond Plato, the Gnostics taught that the divine self fell into a material world, trapped in a body by the cunning and evil creator, the jealous Yahweh of the Bible. It's not moral transgression of God's command, but ignorance of our true origin that constitutes evil, and redemption is attained through an enlightenment that liberates our spirit from the prison of the body and the lower parts of the soul. Our goal is to escape all limitations. Our body limits us. Our spirit is infinite. It's part of divine. It's a divine spark. It's our bodies that limit us. We must transcend our bodies in order to break free of all laws. There are lots of parallels with Gnosticism, and I'll just mention three. First, survival of death is seen as a technical problem involving ignorance rather than a transgression. It really is a matter of spiritual technology. In fact, Davis observes, like the Freemasons and other later secret societies, some Gnostics were apparently fond of doling out mysterious words, strange signals, and mysterious hand gestures, information that the soul would need in its journey through the afterlife, which the Gnostics imagined as a kind of multi-leveled computer game inhabited by demonic gatekeepers and treacherous landscapes. This more magical and alchemical approach to gnosis particularly informs the pagan Corpus Hermeticum, a portion of which made it into the Nag Hammadi library. Not surprisingly, the Nag Hammadi library has bits and bobs of not only Gnostic writings, but Hermetic writings, all there in the milieu of Alexandria. Kurzweil shares Hans Moravec's belief that, quote, no matter how much we fine-tune our DNA-based biology, our flesh and blood systems will always be at a disadvantage relative to our purpose-engineered new creations. Are we living in a simulation? Is this simulated reality? That's what the Gnostics thought, right? That they were living in a simulated reality because the evil God, Yahweh, who created their bodies and trapped their bodies, their soul in bodies, that evil creator Yahweh had them living in a simulator, thinking that that the physical world was real rather than the spiritual world. Really, the parallels are amazing. They are so amazing that the atheist writer John Gray, who's become one of my favorite writers, calls it Gnosticism. He says today's cybernauts are modern Gnostics, and he gives many examples of this. He says this whole phenomenon of simulated reality can be compared to shamanism. In virtual reality, one can die, be resurrected, and then do it all over again, many, many times over, just like the shaman. But that's just it. It's only virtual. The shaman, aided by hallucinogenic drugs, is as comfortable in the other world as in this world. And kids today, believe me, I don't have to tell you, are more comfortable in that world than they are in the real world. How are we going to convince them that this is the real world? Third, transhumanism envisions salvation from the body rather than of it. In fact, Gray claims today's cybernauts are unknowing Gnostics. The flight from the prison of the flesh is the essence of the Gnostic heresy that, despite incessant persecution, persisted in Christendom for centuries, and which survives to this day in the Mandean community in Syria. For Gnostics, the earth is a prison of souls, ruled, perhaps created, not by God, but by a demiurge, an evil spirit. A 20th century Gnostic, Carl Jung, stated the central Gnostic myth in precisely these terms. Jesus promised the resurrection of the body. This is an atheist. Jesus promised the resurrection of the body, not an afterlife, as a disembodied consciousness. The cult of cyberspace continues the Gnostic flight of the body. And George Gilder, whose wealth and poverty fueled the Reagan-era supply-side economics, announces that, quote, the central event now of the 21st century will be the overthrow of matter. It's amazing, too, how many of these writers quote the Upanishads. I mean, they you would have to judge whether they are turning them into American tracts, but it is really amazing how much they turn away from Christian theism. That's the one thing we're sure we have to reject. But Hinduism and Buddhism are all up for grabs. And the Gaia hypothesis. So you have, on one hand, anti-humanism represented by John Gray and James Lovelock, who argue the Gaia hypothesis, that Mother Nature, that the world, the earth, here's another ancient pagan idea, that the earth is an organism, a single organism, and it is going to destroy human beings because they are a cancer. So you have anti-humanism, which, as its name suggests, has a very dim view of human beings, not as fallen, but in their very natures as a parasite. Then you have transhumanism, which holds out the goal of humans having so much power and mastery over nature that they become gods. But both anti-humanism and post-humanism see a post-human future in the cosmos. And now for something completely different, a message that I think that we can give in this time and place. We're talking here about something that has a lot of implications for our view of human beings as the image of God. But I think it may help us to define, there are many ways we define the image of God. But one important way, I think, is to define the beginning from the end. What are we made for? Famous question. Aristotle asked, what is the telos? What is the purpose? That will tell us what something is. What was it made for? Is it good? A good watch isn't just determined by what it's made of, but what it's made for. A good watch is not just a gold watch. A good watch is a watch that tells time. A good human being is one who does and is what God made human beings for. The problem is we failed. We failed at that. We have fallen short of the glory of God. And yet we are designed for glory. So first, design and dignity. What's really interesting is Kurzweil, transhumanist, nevertheless has 3 pages of the science and mathematics that demonstrates that the world could not have come into being by chance. He says, I think it's fair to say we're all on the same page. Almost none of us is a theist, but we're all on the same page that however it happened, it required an intelligent designer. Striking for someone who's arguing for a post-human future. He says, life should not exist, much less intelligent life, yet here you are. It's a miracle, is it not? The particular design of human beings, according to Christianity, affirms their dignity. Contra Lovelock and Gray, humans are special. Creation in God's image and likeness renders human beings unique in the world and uniquely responsible for their execution of this vocation. However, contra transhumanists, this is a reflected glory, like the moon in its relation to the sun. And God holds his image bearers responsible for guarding and keeping his creation. With the rest of nature, we will always be on the creaturely side of the ontological register. And this is what is very important. Imago Dei does not mean there's a part of us that is on the creator side of things, that it's a spark of divinity. My soul is as mortal by nature and finite as my fingernails. Immortality, Paul tells us, is a gift. We are granted to become gods by grace. We are not gods by nature, not even in any part of us. And so there's a qualitative distinction drawn in the scriptures between God and creation, the latter including angels and souls. In the New Testament, as well as the Old, God alone is immortal and eternal, 1 Timothy 6:1. The soul is not conceived as eternal. Immortality is a gift of grace rather than an intrinsic property of nature, 1 Timothy 1:10, Romans 2:7, and 1 Corinthians 15:26. And this underwrites a theocentric rather than anthropocentric perspective. It is not a conquest of nature that we have from Prometheus to Faust. Rather, it is the thou shalt. God gives a command, and we're on the creaturely end of that command. This puts a brake on the sort of radical autonomy that has made human mastery over nature an exploitive relationship. I'm going to skip now to depravity and death. Depravity is a Platonic concept, but it's also biblical. It assumes that there is something good that has become corrupted. Sort of like, my salad in the refrigerator at home that I find 6 days after I put it there. It's a good salad, originally, but I'm not going to eat it now. But whereas Platonism sees depravity in ontological terms as a falling away from the pure unity of being into the diversity of bodies, Christians believe depravity derives from an ethical rebellion against God. For Socrates and Plato, faults are due to ignorance, but in biblical religion, they are the result of transgressing God's command. Human sin, both guilt and corruption, is one of the most empirically verifiable truths. Non-Christian religions acknowledge the reality of guilt and the need for atonement in doctrines such as karma and sacrificial rituals and priesthood and so forth. John Gray, the atheist, can also affirm human depravity. He says technical progress leaves only one problem unsolved: the depravity of human nature. Unfortunately, that problem is insoluble. End quote. He predicts that instead of humans becoming gods, quote, only transgressive behavior will interrupt their boredom. And human beings have shown that transgression is their go-to strategy. The Apostle Paul is not any nicer when he says, what then? Are we Jews better off? Not at all, for we've charged that all, both Jews and Greeks, are under sin, as it is written, none is righteous. No, not one. No one understands. No one seeks for God. All have turned aside. Together they have become worthless. No one does good. No, not even one. Their throat is an open grave. They use their tongues to deceive. The venom of asps is under their lips. Their mouth is full of curses and bitterness. Their feet are swift to shed blood. In their paths are ruin and misery, and the way of peace they have not known. There is no fear of God before their eyes. One might expect after all of that God the Creator would simply exterminate the whole human race from the earth, just as John Gray believes Gaia, Mother Nature, will exterminate man. However, where Gray's anti-humanism targets human nature as such, it's irredeemable, Christianity regards this dire condition as a corruption of nature. And in the following verses, Paul turns from the bad news to the good news concerning God's unilateral redemption of the ungodly in Christ. There is no hope in anti-humanism. But among the transhumanists I've read, there's no trace of any doctrine of sin. There's no tragic moment. So, very easily, once we start upgrading humans and then surpassing humans, all the glitches will be removed, because it's not sin, it's glitches. It's a technical problem requiring a technical solution. We have glitches in our biological 1.0 bodies. So on one point at least, transhumanism and anti-humanism agree, a post-human future. But while the former sees this in terms of gradually deifying humanity through technology, the latter thinks the arrogant species will be stamped out by an apocalyptic judgment by Mother Nature. Anti-humanists are right to be concerned about the history of human destruction of the rest of nature instead of tending and keeping, Genesis 2:15. But they have no hope of redemption. We agree that the problem of human depravity is insoluble from the human side. But God, who is rich in mercy, who while we were dead, made us alive in Christ, by grace you have been saved. And then deliverance, solving guilt and corruption. After the consequences of Adam's disobedience in Genesis 3, the biblical drama unfolds as a promise that God will lift the cursed through the seed of the woman. Time and again, human rebellion against God's covenant brings history to a standstill, but God's recital of His merciful promise and new installments of fulfillment of that promise get history moving forward again. From the perspective of the biblical narrative, the desire to transcend human nature by our effort instead of to be glorified by God's grace is the dreary record since Adam of futile rebellion against God and the created design of every natural and moral law. We seek to justify and then ultimately deify ourselves by our works. It strikes me the whole thing is simultaneously antinomian and legalistic. It's Gnostic. The goal is to get rid of all limitations, all boundaries, all laws, in order to justify ourselves by our works. We determine what those laws are to which we are accountable. This is what Augustine called being curved in on ourselves. And it really is the doctrine of the inner light. It's like, as Paul Tillich said, the Quakers' doctrine of the inner light is simply the Enlightenment, became the Enlightenment's doctrine of the Enlightenment. That's certainly the case. G.K. Chesterton said, maybe it's saying too much to say that Christianity came into the world to destroy the inner light. But it's only a little exaggeration. Christianity came into the world to proclaim the outer light, where history has banners unfurled, God coming with a mighty army to save and to redeem. He'd read a newspaper article suggesting that Christianity, when stripped of its armor of dogma, as who should speak of a man stripped of his armor of bones, turned out to be nothing but the Quaker doctrine of the inner light, end quote. And so we look outside of ourselves. There is no hope in us. We look outside ourselves. Anti-Humanism and transhumanism both look within, but we're called outside of ourselves. And while Adam tries in vain to ascend to God's throne, to attain autonomous gnosis, the last Adam is the God who descends in order to rescue the race and the creation it has spoiled. And instead he responds, man shall not live by what he sees, what he thinks is wise and desirable to make one wise, but what comes from the mouth of God. All three, dignity, depravity, and deliverance, are affirmed in the Christian narrative as in Romans 8, the whole creation subjected to futility, but waiting in hope. According to the Gnostic trajectory, the deeper we descend into ourselves, the higher we ascend. But has this ever accomplished anything? Think of the 20th century alone. What has this accomplished? The most civilized century of the Western world? How good did it go for us? How well were we at transcending our glitches? And now we're those humans who are going to create new beings with a greater power of creation and destruction in the future. This is how Irenaeus described the Gnostic consensus. This then is the true redemption, they say, that their inner man may ascend on high in an invisible manner, as if their body were left among created things, while their soul is sent forward to the demiurge. It's exactly a description today, I think, of what the transhumanists are suggesting. But instead, we have a mystical union with Christ. Christ not only bears our guilt, but by his meritorious obedience as the faithful Son of Man, wins for us the right finally to eat from the tree of life. And then finally, in conclusion, deification, immortal glory. In God's story, we actually do get to become gods. What the early church fathers meant by this was that what the eternal Son is by nature, we become by grace. Because we become adopted sons, both men and women. We become adopted sons and co-heirs in Jesus Christ, the eternal Son. It's never that our natures meld. It's not essential. It's not that I lose my identity in God. I always remain a creature. He always is creator. But what it means is that I now will bear that not just original stamp of righteousness and holiness, conformity to the moral attributes of God, but I will be confirmed in glory, which Adam was promised if he succeeded. But he failed. He failed to attain that for him and for his posterity. The second Adam won it. And because of that, we are going to be immortal, which means deified. As John Calvin said, this is the greatest of all possible blessings, our deification. For we shall become as much like God as it is possible for a creature to be. What a wonderful hope. And it's given to us by grace. This story beats the heck out of the transhumanist story. And certainly the anti-humanist story, right? I mean, this is a great time for us to be living, to be able to have such a sharp contrast between what young people are hearing today, especially, and what we have to say to them. This will resonate, I believe. Here's the thing, bottom line. Christians believe in the dignity of humanity more than humanists. The guilt and corruption of humans more than anti-humanists. And the glory to come through faith in Christ more than transhumanists. Thank you.